title of Shane's talk is EGS, Translating Consciousness into Action. Please join me in welcoming Shane.
Chris, good morning, everyone. It's good to see such a nice turnout this morning. I'd like to think you're here to listen to me talk, but my guess is I'm playing a fairly distant second to a good pancake breakfast. So whatever brought you here, I'm glad that you're here. And as Chris said, I'm going to talk about ecological goods and services and about the idea of getting that information out there and well understood. So the outline of my talk today, I'm going to talk about science as a foundation. You know, what do we really need from that? Making science understandable and relevant. That's a big challenge that we have. Getting it to the right people, and then getting some sort of commitment to action. We heard a lot about these themes that I'm going to talk about yesterday, and so I'm going to just elaborate on some of that. I'm going to use wetlands as an example because you know, that's our game, and that's where I have my experience. So when you talk about knowledge level or consciousness, I know when I first saw the title they wanted me to talk about, I actually said to myself, you know, what consciousness? Because as much as there's a high level of awareness in this room, elsewhere it's still pretty low, it would be my opinion. And we have a lot of work to do if we're going to take that from knowledge and understanding to actually action. You know, what is it that different groups need to know? Because there are a number of different groups that have to be educated, I'll say. The government, you know, what does the government really need? They need to understand cost-benefit of policies and programs, or they're not going to move ahead. The public needs to support these policies and programs, so they need a certain set of information that allows them to do that. You know, landowners certainly have to understand why they should get involved. We think that we design the best programs and that they should just follow along, but really they don't, many of them would not understand how much natural capital they have, what is the value of that natural capital, who do they sell it to, how much is it worth, and until they can understand that, it's pretty hard to engage them in some sort of action and moving ahead. So I'm going to say education and outreach is critical for this, but it really goes a lot deeper than the education and outreach. It's I don't even know what the right term is, but certainly it's strategic communication and marketing to a number of different groups. You know, and I think we got to clearly define what we want. We quite often, as scientists, produce information, and we think, well, you know, everyone should understand it, and we should move ahead based on the quality of the information. But you know, what is it that we want? Do we want stewardship? Do we want conservation? Do we want protection? What are the definitions of those three things? And you know, are we aware of moving towards these and the actions that are required, and what are the consequences? And certainly there are consequences. There's, from a government standpoint, there's costs, so we have to make sure we lay out what the benefit is. You know, maybe we want policy change, maybe we want program, but I think we have to be really clear about what it is that we want, because stewardship and conservation is this big animal that you know, we really need to break down into components if we're actually going to move ahead. I'm going to talk about something that we did in Manitoba recently that illustrates breaking science down into something that's understandable. And we looked at what we're doing. Okay. One more time. What we're doing is talking about water that's coming from Broughton's Creek into the Assiniboine River, into the Red River, and into Lake Winnipeg. We need to understand that this is a big area and that wetland loss affects the water quality in Lake Winnipeg. So these are big issues, and we need to simplify them so that we can understand them better and make decisions about, you know, how do we allocate resources in the province. We have done some of the most sophisticated GIS work out there on wetland loss. We know every individual wetland, every individual man-made drain that's on this landscape. So this is the northeast corner of Broughton's Creek, and if you'll watch, this is 1968, so those are all wetlands in blue. And this is 2005. So those types of images are really important when you're trying to get your point across that this is a problem and that significant change has occurred on the landscape. You need to verify that. So 69% of the wetland basins have been drained or degraded, and on 100 square miles, that's about 6,000 individual wetlands. So very significant. We used to show very pretty images of wetlands and what it should look like. We've taken the other direction now, which is showing negative landscapes, landscapes that have been extensively drained, and find that that is far more effective at getting our point across. We also think that scale is important, so we've blown up that information to southwestern Manitoba, and we talk about percent increases, not tonnage of phosphorus, because no one really understands that anyway. So there's a 31% increase in the land that's draining downstream now. If you look at that yellow area, since 1968, that is an additional 1,800 square miles that is now draining off the land that did not drain prior. 41% increase in sediment loading, 31% increase in phosphorus export. So even without the individual numbers there, you get the idea that this is a significant environmental problem that can affect surface waters throughout southern Manitoba. People don't understand what 114 tons of phosphorus is. In fact, when we did it, I didn't know whether that was lots or little. I was assuming it was lots, but we find that breaking it down into something like this, it's the equivalent of 10 semi-loads of commercial fertilizer being dumped into Lake Winnipeg every year. It's the same as 544,000 bags of lawn fertilizer being dumped there every year. So those types of numbers mean something. They mean something to politicians. They certainly mean something to the media. The media love those kinds of numbers, and they mean something to landowners and the general public as well. Carbon, 5 million tons of carbon doesn't mean much to people either, but it's the emissions of 169,000 cars for a 20-year period. People understand that. And it's really important to try to attach some economics to this, and this is an emerging social science, I'm going to say, to be creative enough to try to put together a reasonable quality of data to come up with some economic estimates, because as much as you can find the environmental problem and you can talk about it, without an economic value on there, nobody really acts on it. So, we just looked at the nutrient removal value and the carbon sequestration value, and that comes out to $430 million over that 37 years. And that is a very conservative estimate, because it doesn't take into consideration all of the other values or ecological goods and services that we aren't able to value. In 2005, it's $15 million. We also think it's very important to project these numbers into the future. So, by the year 2020, if wetland loss continues at the rate that it has, it's going to be $19 million a year. Now, why is that important? I think if the province of Manitoba is looking at mitigating phosphorus input into Lake Winnipeg, and they're not considering wetland loss, then they're missing a big part of the picture. And you can treat the city of Winnipeg's water, for example, but if you don't take care of this problem, probably all of that money you're spending there is going to be negated by further wetland loss. Marketing and communication of this information is critical. I spent, I think they said, 18 years with ducks, and it takes a lot of creativity and a lot of different heads to get information in a form that's understandable by politicians, by landowners, by the general public. And right now we work with a group that are scientists, biologists, marketing and communication people, and people that are in government relations, because if you're trying to change a policy, you better ask your policy person what information he needs, because if you think you can generate the information that he needs without talking to him, you'll find out pretty quickly that you don't have the right information. So very important. Clearly identify who you're targeting, what specifically do you want, from whom. These are tough questions, but if you don't get specific on them, you'll have a hard time moving ahead with whatever stewardship or conservation initiative that you might have.